Hello, welcome to Form and Function from Afar. I'm Karen Hardy. I'm one of the instructors at Book Paper Thread, and I'll be the moderator for this session, which is Cut, Pleat, Twist with Gina Pisello. Thank you all for being a part of these 3 days of presentations and demonstrations by some of the most inspiring artists and craftspeople in our community. We're very excited to see how many of you, we're nearing 2,000 people registered now, who are with us for the conference, and how many of you have been introducing yourselves and your work in the online portal, connecting with friends and colleagues there. We hope that you'll continue that through the next few days and even after the conference. I want to cover a few things about how this Zoom webinar will run. It's slightly different than a Zoom meeting, which you might be more familiar with. Since we have a large audience, attendees will not be connected by video, but you can certainly ask questions and make comments. There are two avenues for that, the chat and the Q&A sections, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. We have assistants monitoring both of those. We'll use the chat for sharing links to things that the presenter mentions during their talk. And the Q&A is where you can type in a question. We'll either type a response there or the presenter may answer the question live. We have a lot of attendees, so please be patient with us as we manage those questions. Also, there's a spot down in the bottom right of your chat window where there's a little blue box, and you want to make sure that you select panelists and attendees if you want everyone to see what you're sharing. So while I'm getting started, you can go ahead and open up that chat window and share with us who you are and where you're joining us from. We really enjoy seeing the range of places and communities that we're connecting with today. If you think of a question after the fact, there's space to post follow-up questions and continue the conversation on the conference website. If you experience issues connecting or other technical trouble, don't worry. This session is being recorded and will be available first on our conference website, and later it'll be uploaded to Book Paper Thread's YouTube channel. So if you miss anything, you can circle back and rewatch any of these. I'll introduce Gina in a minute and hand it over to her. First, I want to acknowledge our sponsors who made it possible for us to offer this virtual conference to you all for free. We have 10 fabulous sponsors listed on our conference site and shown here. Please check out what they're sharing in the virtual vendor fair, see what they have to offer by following the links to their websites. Don't forget that some of the sponsors are offering discounts for conference attendees, so that's a nice perk. If you're looking for more online learning opportunities, please consider the offerings at Book Paper Thread. We cover a variety of topics in book and paper arts and offer different styles of workshop, from pre-recorded sessions in month-long courses to live weekend workshops. So now to introduce our speaker, Gina Pisello is a paper engineer and book artist. She has taught book arts for over 16 years, focusing mainly on book structures she has invented. Membership in groups such as San Diego Book Arts and Puget Sound Book Arts have given her opportunities to learn new skills and share discoveries with fellow artists. Her work has been accepted in exhibitions in San Diego County, University of Puget Sound, University of South Dakota, the Minnesota Center for Book Arts, and the University of Western England, Bristol. Her work is in several private collections, as well as the University of Washington and the University of Puget Sound special collections. And I will hand it over to you now, Gina, if you want to turn on your camera.
Yeah, it's on.
All right. I'm going to add your spotlight there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my home studio where I play with paper and occasionally teach 6-person workshops. So you're a little bit larger of a group than normally fits in my room, but welcome. I'd like to start by thanking Linda and Karen and Andrew for inviting me to participate in this workshop and this conference, and also to thank the sponsors for making it possible. Today, I will be teaching a technique that I use for altering books, but you can use for a whole host of things. And I'm hoping that you will learn this basic technique and then go and play with it, which is what I love to do. I love to learn a basic introductory technique from another artist or a book that I've read, and then I love to play and see what I can do with it. So let's go ahead and go to my down camera so I can show things. And the first thing I want to say is that the technique I'm going to be showing you is from this book, Paul Jackson's Complete Pleats. And he calls it a, let me open the page. He calls it a cut pleat across pleats. So this is like a step up from just a normal cut pleat. We're going to be crossing pleats and then cutting them. And what you get as a result is something like this if you use contrasting paper. I'm going to go over the materials list right now, just briefly in case you didn't have a chance to gather materials before we started, and then I'm going to show some samples and talk for a minute or two. So if you didn't get a chance to gather them, you can run and grab them right now. The nice thing about this technique is it's easy to do with materials that are right around you. So the materials you will need are a piece of paper, preferably one that has one design on one side and a contrasting design on the other side. So magazine pages are fabulous for this. But if you don't have a magazine handy, you can use just a piece of printer paper, or A4 is great. And I just have one where it's printed on one side and blank on the other. This will work fine too. You can also use decorative papers. Marble paper and paste paper are great because they tend to be just white on the other side. You can also use, I was in the washi arts talk, or the paper place talk just now, and so I have some lovely old vintage washi paper that I sumonagashi'd, and this would work beautifully too. Or you can even use something like a magazine ad, and this one's great because it's completely different color from one side to the other. The one thing I would suggest that you avoid this first time around is really thick paper. It's going to be difficult to fold the pleats if the paper is really thick. So that's why magazine pages or printer paper are excellent for this. The other couple of things you'll need are a pair of scissors for cutting later. A bone folder is helpful, but not absolutely necessary. And you might want a pen to mark where you're going to make your cuts. But you can really get away with a sheet of paper and a pair of scissors. So if you need to go gather those now is a great time to do that. And then while people are doing that for a second, I'm going to move these aside. And I'm going to show you some of the things that I've done with this technique. So the basic thing you can do is, and this is what we're going to do today, is create this piece where you get imagery from the back side, penetrates through to the front side, and then is actually rotated in places. And you get this nice blend of the image from the two sides, which I think is very fascinating. And that's why I like it for altered books. So I made an altered book late last year using this technique. Here's the book, and I love how all these textures you get too from the folding. But the original pages of this book, and what I did was I unbound a book of wildflowers. So this is what an original page looked like, and you can see kind of the size difference here. So I took a page, and in this case, I folded a set of pleats on one side and then a separate set of pleats on the other side, and left the middle intact so that I could bind it. But you get this cool blending of the flowers from the two sides of the page, and also the text at the bottom. And then the back side makes some interesting patterns as well, which we'll discuss. So this is one idea for altering a book. Another thing that I've done with this technique is make a lantern out of it. And this was a folded lantern that I learned from Helen Hebert, but I added the twist pleat to the center of each of the faces of the lantern. And I have a YouTube video that shows how to make this. So once you've learned the technique today, you can go look that up, and it'll be really easy to do. And then another thing you can do is do all the creasing and pleating and folding and cutting, and then you can take that, if it's a larger sheet of paper, you can then take that and fold it into something like an accordion fold and make a book out of a single sheet of paper. And you could add text or all sorts of other things. I have some other variations that you can do with the basic structure, but I'm going to save those for the end because I think they'll make more sense once you've learned how to do the folding and cutting part of it. So if everyone is ready, I'm going to give you a couple of basic origami terms that we'll be using, and then I'm going to show you the overall crease pattern, and then we'll actually get started with our piece of paper. So you really just need to know two terms in origami for this, and that is a mountain fold and a valley fold. So this piece of paper has just been folded in half, and this side where it comes up from the plane of your table, once you made the fold, that's called a valley fold. So a valley fold makes a V shape and goes down into the surface. A mountain fold is just that same fold, but the other direction. So it goes up like a mountain. It totally makes sense. But I will be using those terms. So I just wanted you to be familiar with what I'm going to mean by that. The next thing I want to show you, and this is just to give you an overview of where we're going, and don't be intimidated by this image because we're going to go through all these steps one by one. But next thing I want to show you is, this is something called a crease pattern. It's very popular now in origami to create a pattern like this so that people can see the overall structure of how you're going to fold the paper. So the convention is that red lines are mountain folds and blue lines are valley folds. And then we're actually going to be doing some cutting at these intersections of mountain folds. We'll get to that as one of the last steps. But I just wanted to, for those of you out there who are origami people, this might give you a sense of where we're going. All right, so grab your piece of paper. I'm going to use this magazine image piece of paper because it folds nicely. I'm going to actually start with the paper in the landscape orientation. And I'm going to start with what I'm calling the back side of my piece of paper. So for the most part, I'm going to make my front side be the calmer or the white side of my paper, just because it'll be easier for you to see what I'm doing. But you can choose either side to be the front or the back. The back is going to be, I'll show you, bring back the sample. The back of the paper is going to be the side that's going to give us these cuts at the end. So whatever you want your back side to be, I want you to have that face up. And then what we're going to do to start with is a series of folds that will divide paper top to bottom into quarters. I'm going to put on my glasses so I can see what I'm doing. All right, so to do that, we're going to take I always fold away from myself, but fold however you're most comfortable. So I'm going to take the bottom edge of the paper and just fold it up to the top edge. And you want to be fairly precise about your folds, and then just give it a crease along that center line. And if you're using slightly thicker paper, you might want to use a bone folder for this. But if you don't have a bone folder, you can use the back of your nail as a nice thing to use to give a nice crease. And then you're going to unfold. And then we're going to fold each of these edges to that center crease. And you don't want to fold over the crease, you just want to fold up to it. So I'm going to line it up on both sides. I'm going to make sure my edges are straight. And then I usually come down to the center of the crease and then crease in either direction. And again, you can give that a bone fold if you want. And because I like to fold away from myself, I'm going to rotate my paper all the way around. And I'm going to leave this side folded up. I like to use this folded edge to butt up against when I'm folding up my other edge. So just bring that bottom piece of paper up. And once you've got it nice and straight, you're just going to crease across. And your paper should look like this. We've now made 3 valley folds. We're going to unfold everything, and we've divided the paper into 4 equal sections. Now we're going to do the same thing in the other direction. So we're going to rotate the paper 90 degrees. You're going to fold the bottom edge up to the top edge. And this time, you really want to make sure that your left and right edges align, because we put those creases in the other direction. I also sort of use my fingernail to make sure that edge is straight. I'm just going to take a second. I'm going to come down that center and crease across. And you're probably finding that your paper folds easier in one direction versus the other, and that's because of the grain of the paper. Unless it's handmade, your paper has a grain where it prefers, where the fibers are lined up in one direction versus the other. So this fold for me was a little bit harder to do than the long fold. And then you're going to unfold, and you've made your first center valley fold crease. And then you're going to fold the bottom edge up to the center, just like we did before. And this time, not only can you align along that center, but you know that you're creasing it correctly. You might have a little hard time seeing my creases up here, but I can see that my vertical lines are lining up as well. So once I've got all that lined up and got my edges lined up, crease down the center and then go across. Give it a quick bone fold. And then we just have one more crease to make. So I'm going to rotate. And then I'm going to bring the bottom edge up to the center. Again, I like to butt that paper up against the other paper. Give it a nice crease. And then you've divided your paper into quarters in the other direction. Okay, so we're going to unfold these two folds. I'll turn my paper around so it's right side up. Okay, so we've successfully divided the paper into quarters vertically and horizontally. This is a good place to pause if anybody has a question or needs me to show them one of these folds again, please do.
Gina, we did have one question. Someone was asking how well this might work with a deckle-edged piece of paper.
You can do that, and I've done it with torn edges of paper. The one issue that you'll have is you need to decide how that deckle edge is going to line up with your fold and sort of be consistent about that. What you really care about more than anything is that the intersection of the creases is at 90 degrees. So everything else is negotiable. Right. But deckle edge, it would look really nice. It would give you a nice, you might want to deckle the edge. I don't know if you could deckle it after because you're going to have layers of paper. But I wouldn't start with a deckled edge, but I would certainly play with it once you've got the basic technique down. Yes.
Right. And someone was interested in getting a copy of that pattern you showed. That's something we might do after this session.
Yes, I just made it last night, so I will. Yeah, I'll make that a PDF and.
Okay, so we'll put that on the course conversations later on.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. That's it.
All right, great. Now we've done all our valley folding on this one side of the paper, but what we really want to work with is the mountain folds. And remember, I told you that's just the opposite side. So we're going to flip our paper over, and I'm going to go back to the landscape orientation of my paper, just because folding the longer edges is a little harder to do. So I want to start with those. And we have 3 mountain folds. Hopefully you can see those. Just reinforce them a little. And here is the step where it's a tiny bit tricky, not really, but I need you to watch what I do before you do it, because if you just do it, you're going to fold in the wrong place, and then you basically need to start over again. So please watch first. I'm going to do it several times, so you don't need to do it as I do it right now. So what we want to do is start with this first mountain fold that is closest to us. And we're going to sort of start lifting it with our thumb and finger. And I pinch my thumb and finger and I sort of tug gently at the edges of the paper to get it to stand up, because you want those 2 layers of paper to really come together. And what we're going to do is bring this mountain fold to the center mountain fold. But here's what I do not want you to crease this, okay? I just want you to bring it up to that center fold. And then we're just going to pinch about the width of your finger on the left-hand edge and pinch. Once you've got those 2 mountain folds aligned, just pinch with your right finger on this edge, just a little, like a 1/2 inch, 1 centimeter sort of pinch, and then unfold. We just want to mark the halfway point between the 2 mountains. Okay. So I'm going to give you a second to go ahead and do that since I wanted you to watch me. And I know everyone was listening to what I said.
While you're waiting, there was a question about whether the proportions of the paper matter.
Yes. So whatever proportion the paper is the proportion relatively that you will get with your final, rectangle. So if you start with a rectangular piece of paper, you're going to get rectangle shapes in your twisted pleats. If you start with a square piece of paper, you'll get squares. So it does matter in terms of that. But I chose this piece of paper because the pleats get very tiny very fast. So the smaller your paper is, the narrower your pleats are going to be. So this one gives us about a 1/2 inch in each direction of a pleat, which is not too difficult to fold. But if you scale, the first one of these I did was with origami paper, which is about 6 by 6 or 15 centimeters by 15 centimeter. And that gives you like a 1/4 inch pleat. That's very tiny. So it can be hard to fold that. But I encourage you to try all different sizes of paper. And when I show you some examples at the end, you don't even have to do squares. So, all right, so I just marked where my pinches are so that you can see them a little better. And now we're going to fold that mountain fold up to those pinch marks. Okay, so you're gonna bring it up again, just tug at the edges a little bit and make sure that, one of the things I do to make sure the 2 layers stay together is as I'm folding over, I'm sort of tucking the paper under with my fingers. And I'm going to align this left side carefully. And then I'm going to slowly go across the paper. And I'm going to, as I get to each intersection with the pleat fold going in or with the mountain fold in the other direction, I'm just going to make sure that they're lined up. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm just sort of walking across, and then I'm going to make sure I'm lined up with this other mark. And then you're going to be folding the layer of paper that's underneath this top layer. I'll lift it up to show you. You're creasing this piece right here, but I actually want you to crease it on top of this piece of paper because this is going to help us with the next part, because we need this, we're forming a pleat and we need it to go in both directions. So you could mark the halfway point in the other direction, but it's a lot easier if you just start to slowly stand up your pleat. And as you're doing that, make sure you're pinching the 2 layers of paper together. And then I run my thumbnails very gently along this back side that's closer to me and start to form that crease in the other direction. And then I slowly lay it down and crease my valley fold in the other direction. Now, if you want to be super precise, you can measure those halfway points all the way across. But I find that this works just fine. Okay. So now we have a pleat that folds in both directions. And I'm actually going to fold it back towards that, the mark that we made at the beginning of this process. And now, like I did before when I was doing the 1/4 folds, I'm going to rotate my paper around because I like to fold away from me. So now we're going to go to this center crease and we're going to start pinching it together. And if it's giving you trouble, just go in there and pinch it with your fingers. But if you tug a little bit on the edges, it usually stands up nicely. And then we're going to fold this mountain fold up to, but not over. And it doesn't have to go all the way up to, but you want to get as close as you can to the mountain fold that's forming the pleat next to it. So I'm just going to snuggle these 2 up together. And you don't want to overlap them in any way because then our final twist will not work. So if you're, a little bit of, here, let me show you. If you can be a little bit away, you can have a gap, that's fine, as long as they're parallel to each other. But I like to just, like I said, the paper is a nice stop for itself. You butt it up against itself. Again, I'm going to go over that layer of crease a couple of times with my fingers, just gently. And I'm going to slowly start standing this pleat up. Make sure the 2 layers of paper are nice and together. You don't want it to be spread out in a V shape. You want it really tight together like this. And just once you make sure that they're together, run your thumbnails back and forth a little bit. And then lay down your paper towards you, and then you're going to leave it in this direction. So just give it a couple of creases. And if you're using thicker paper, you might want to use your bone folder, but mine is thin enough, I don't need it. And then we're just going to do the same thing with this third mountain fold. So we're going to lift it up and tug on our paper a little bit. And just slowly walk it up and make sure you're sort of tucking under that second layer of paper. And I'm just going to walk my hand across, making sure I'm lining up. And give it a good crease. Stand it up. And my thumbnails gently along the edge. And then once I feel like that fold is starting to be made, I will crease in the other direction. So your paper should look something like this. And I'll show you a side view so you can kind of see the dimension that we're starting to get here as we lay these pleats on top of each other. And your pleats should go in both directions. Just make sure they go both ways. And then we're going to unfold. And you want to kind of run your hands over all these pleats because we want the paper to go back to as flat as possible so that when we do the pleats the other way, they're going to get a little bit distorted, but we're going to try to make it as nice as we can. Okay, rotate your paper 90 degrees. We're going to start with the first mountain fold that is closest to us. We're going to, again, pinch the paper up. And then this first step, remember, I'm going to take this mountain fold to the center mountain fold, but I'm not going to crease all the way across. I am simply going to line it up and do a little pinch at the left side with my finger right here, where you can feel that layer of thicker paper. And I'm going to pinch just a little bit on the right and unfold. And I will show you where those pinch marks are. Drawing a line. And then we're just going to do exactly what we did the last time. So we're going to take that mountain fold, pinch it, and we're going to fold at this pinch mark, which is the halfway point. And now we have even more vertical lines to help us line up as we go across, and really make sure you're tucking under that paper layer that's underneath and trying to keep this layer of paper as flat as possible. Do some preliminary creasing. You're sort of pre-training the paper to want to fold back. And for me, this is the direction where my paper grain is going the opposite way. So this one is a little bit harder for me to fold, but it's not bad because the thin paper wants to behave. So stand your pleat up, run your nails gently along that side closer to you, and slowly lay it down and complete that pleat. And then I'm going to fold it back towards those pinch marks, rotate my paper, stand up the center mountain fold and fold it. Just sort of wrangle your paper as flat as you can. And I'm going to fold it towards the pleat that's positioned there. And I'm just going to line up my vertical lines as I go across. Just take a second. And remember, you don't want to overlap, but you can have a little bit of a gap between them as long as they're parallel. And I'm going to press that crease a couple of times. Slowly stand up your pleat. And then lay it down the other way. Leave it folded in this direction. Go down to your third mountain fold. Lay your hand sort of flat on the paper and start pushing your thumb towards your fingers to lift up that mountain fold. Grab the pleat ahead of you to flatten it. And then line everything up. Fold across. We are almost finished. We've got 2 more steps. And stand up your last pleat and your thumbnail gently along the edge closer to you, and do that last valley fold. Okay, and then we're going to unfold everything, and I'm going to rotate my paper. I'm going to go back to this landscape direction. Okay, now is where I'm going to bring back my diagram, because the next thing we have to do is cut, and I want you to see really clearly where we're going to be cutting.
Gina,
So we did a series of pleats that are a mountain fold in the center and a valley fold on either side. And we did that in 2 directions. Where the mountain folds cross each other, and there's 9 intersections that you can see here, we're going to cut on those mountain folds. So I'm going to mark my piece of paper that I've been folding with you, and you can do that too, because it won't show after you do the cutting. Or if you can see clearly enough your mountain folds, you don't need to mark it. But we are going to be cutting these cross hatches. And I'm going to show you how to do that with a little bit of fold. We're going to refold some of our structure, and then it's really simple to line it up, and we're going to cut a couple of layers at a time. So I'm going to take a second to mark my intersections, and if anybody has a question while I'm doing that, this would be a good time to ask. And you don't have to do these if you, like I said, if you can see your mountain folds really clearly, you don't have to mark them. And we're just marking from the valley fold of each pleat to the valley fold of the opposite pleat. So are there any questions?
yeah, there was a question about if the first pleat was 1/2 inch, would the second pleat then be 3/4 of an inch?
On the 8.5 by 11, I think when I was measuring out my piece of printer paper, because I did do this accurately, it was like just over 5/8 of an inch in one direction, and it wasn't that big of a difference. It was a little bit more than 5/8 in one direction, and almost exactly 1/2 inch in the other direction. So that's for 8.5 by 11. It varies. If you have if you think about it, you're dividing each dimension of the paper in quarters, and then you're having that as well, because you're only folding to the midpoint between the creases. So yeah, for some reason, it's not that big of a difference with this paper.
Great. We have another one here. What's the name of this fold as described by Paul Jackson's book?
He calls it cut across pleats, I believe. Let me grab my book and double check again. He has a cut pleat, which is just a single pleat. This one is cut pleat across cut pleat. So we're actually pleating in 2 directions and then cutting in those 2 directions as well. But he has a simpler one where you simply make parallel pleats, and then you do a single cut instead of this plus. You just do cut once, and then you can make the pleats lay down. I'll show you that, because we're going to do that step before we finish everything up.
Great. And someone wanted to see your pattern for just a moment again.
This.
Yeah.
There you go. And if you have his book, Complete Pleats, which by the way is a fabulous book, if you like pleating paper, he covers basically everything. And Andrew has a link for the Amazon bookstore. It's still available. So I think I gave you a link for that. Hopefully you put it in the.
I'll put that in just a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has very comprehensive. And last year he had a video showing how to do this too, but it has since disappeared. So he was the one that I learned how to do you just stand up the pleat and give it a little crease on the other side and fold it back, rather than, because I was marking all of the intersections, and he was the one that in his video showed how to do that. But that video has vanished. So.
And on the diagram here, if you could show again where the cuts go.
Yeah, it's a little hard to see, but they're the black lines in the center here between the blue lines, and they're on the red lines. Can you see? So there's 9 places where the pleats intersect each other. And we're going to be cutting there.
Okay, I think that's it.
Okay. All right, so now we are ready to cut. Grab your scissors. You can do this with an X-Acto blade and a ruler, but I find that it's not that much more accurate and it's a little more fussy, so I just do it with scissors. So we're going to refold. Do you know what I did? I marked the wrong place. I did the thing that it's easy to do. I have to move this up. Hang on a sec. Put my last set of cuts in the wrong spot. All right, it's a little easier to tell when you do the folds. Okay, so I'm going to start at the bottom closest to me, and I'm going to pinch back up my mountain fold. And I'm going to take this piece of paper, this bit of paper here, and I'm going to tuck it behind because we don't need to worry about that. And so now you can just see my black line, just a single one here, in each of these 3 areas. And that's what I'm going to cut. So I'm cutting from the fold to the valley fold. And I might go just a hair past that. And the way that I nest my scissors so that I know I'm cutting right on the mountain fold is I actually pinch the fold that's going vertically also, and then I can just rest my scissors. I don't know if you can see that. I'm just going to rest my scissors in that V fold and cut. And you're not going to get an absolutely precise straight cut. If you want an absolutely precise straight cut, then this is where I would recommend that you use a straight edge and an X-Acto blade or some kind of craft knife to cut. Although I find that that doesn't necessarily get you perfection either. Perfection is overrated. So I'm going to, I've cut the first one. I'm going to move to the second one. Again, I'm going to sort of tent that mountain fold that's going in the other direction. I'm going to stick my scissors, rest them in that little indent, and cut up to, and maybe just like a millimeter past the valley fold, just to make sure I've got it fully cut. And then I'm going to pinch this third one, snip it. And that's our first row done. And then we're going to leave that folded, grab the second mountain fold and fold. Now your paper will be folded in half. And you want that, the mountain fold towards you and the rest of the paper folded away. And then again, I'm going to pinch that first vertical mountain fold and just snip. Move on to the second one. Now, what happens if you accidentally cut a valley? If you mismarked like I did on that first row, and you realize that, oops, I cut the wrong thing. That's where handy dandy tape comes into play. Just tape it up and cut the right cross section. And you tape it on this side of the paper because you won't see that when you open it up. All right, so now I've done the 3 cuts on the center mountain fold, and I'm going to tuck that behind, and I'm going to fold this last quarter of the paper on the mountain. Make sure you're folding on the mountain. It shouldn't fold the way you're seeing me do it. If you're folding on the valley, it would be folding the opposite way. And then tent this a little bit, tuck your scissors in there, and snip. Just go all the way across. So when you've done all of that, excuse me, let me take a sip of water. Once you've completed all of those, it's a little hard to see, but you should have these holes that go across your pleat between the valley folds and across that mountain fold on the top in all 9 positions. So make sure you've got all 9 of them cut.
Gina, just to clarify, you cut each of them individually and didn't stack them in any way?
I did not.
Okay, great.
Yeah. No. The only, well, I did a layer of stacking. So I cut I folded at the mountain and then I cut the two valleys simultaneously. So I only did this one half cut, but it cut the other side too. But I didn't cut like a whole row or a whole, I suppose, I don't know if you could. I suppose you could gather all three of them. No, because you'd introduce another fold. You can't do that. You have to do it one at a time.
Great.
You don't want to introduce extra folds. All right, so now that we've hopefully got all of those done, we're going to rotate the paper 90 degrees, and we're just going to do the same thing again in the other direction. So I'm going to take this first mountain fold, tuck it back behind, and the same thing, I'm going to just pinch the mountain fold that's running in the other direction. And this is going to be a slightly longer cut because it's a slightly wider area. And then another suggestion is to do the cut across the mountain in a single stroke. If you do lots of little cuts, it's going to go astray. So try to do it as a single cut. Didn't quite cut far enough. All right, so that's the first row. Then I'm going to fold it in half. Tent this. And this is where taking a minute to draw where you're going to cut is helpful. But also finding that other mountain fold should be a good indicator of where you should cut. Now, one of the things that I'm not showing you, but that you can do is we divided the paper into quarters because that's really easy to do, but you could divide the paper into thirds or fifths or sixths or eighths, or you can make a much bigger grid or a smaller grid. You could just do a pleat in, one pleat in each direction and do this, but I thought the quarters was easy, and it's fun to see multiple of these when we get done. So there's lots of possibilities here.
So, and again, you're just cutting through the mountain fold in the opposite direction for each of these, correct?
Yeah, so I've got the 2 layers of paper, and I'm just cutting both layers along this line that I've marked that's on both mountain folds. So the mountain fold that's going horizontally is folded back, and then I'm cutting on the mountain fold that's going vertically. And then once you've done all of those, now you should have these these openings that look like pluses. And you should again have that in all 9 places. I don't know, it's a little hard to see. And we're doing all of this on what I call the front side of the paper. And that's another thing that's kind of important with this when you're doing this is to never reverse folds if you can help it. So always, and you're not going to accordion fold either. You're going to do valley folds on one side of the paper, flip it over, use the mountain folds on the other side to help you make valley folds. And I mean, you can reverse folds, but it's generally better if you don't have to. So. Okay, so is everybody here? We just have sort of 1.5. We have a partial step. We have two half steps. One step that doesn't reveal any magic, and then the second half, which I just love because to me it's just magical. So let's see. I'm going to leave the paper this way. I guess it doesn't really matter. You can do it either direction. But the next thing we need to do once we've got all of our cuts in place is we need to redo the pleats, but now because let me just show you. It's easier to show than to just tell you. So we've got
Gina, before you start,
yep.
Looks like a couple of folks are catching up.
Okay.
Someone posted in the chat that Paul Jackson has videos on Vimeo showing many of his pleats from his book. So that might be one place that people can look.
Yeah.
John isn't sure if this is one of the ones that's in there, but that is a place.
Yeah, it seems like I looked there. I don't know. I might have missed it on the second look because I had seen the video maybe a year ago. And I went back when I taught this to San Diego Book Arts back in November. And I mentioned the video to people then, and I went to look for it. And I I couldn't find it, but it could be there. But
Okay,
yeah,
maybe
and
we
he
can
just
all-
does, he just does a single pleat in each direction. So, but it's enough to give you the idea.
Great, and maybe if anyone who's attending finds that, if you want to put that in the continuing conversations, we can all hunt
Yeah,
it.
that'd be great. And he does, yeah, he does have other videos showing his techniques, which is nice. All right, so are we ready to move on?
I think so.
Okay, great. So you're going to take that first mountain fold, and we have 4 segments now that are independent of each other. They can, because we did those cuts, they can fold in either direction. And what we want to do is we're going to lay them down, but we're going to lay them down opposite each other. So I'm going to start on the left, and I'm going to fold them. And again, it doesn't matter which direction you start with, but you need to proceed once you've done that. So excuse me, I'm going to take the first pleat and fold it away from me and flatten it. And then the next pleat has to go the opposite direction. So I'm going to fold it towards me. And then the third pleat will fold away from me. And the fourth pleat will fold towards me. And this is where a bone folder can come in handy, especially where the pleats switch directions. It's good to bone fold that down a little bit. So they're going to zigzag. All right. And then the next mountain fold pleat, we're going to pick that up. And these are also going to go opposite each other as we go down the line, but they also have to pair up with the ones that we've already done. So the pleat and I don't know how you want to think about this. There's lots of ways to think about it, but if a pleat is folding away from me, then the first one on the next row has to fold towards me. So they have to be opposite as well. And then the second one would fold away if you're following and make sure your pleats mine was not doing very well, and it's because my paper was spreading out. So make sure that the 2 layers of paper are together. So the first one comes towards me, the second one goes away, the third one comes towards me, and the fourth one goes away. And again, bone folder is your friend here for flattening these out. And if you can see from these first 2 sets of pleats that we've done, I sort of think of these as shutters as well. So I've got the shutters closed in this first pair, and then the second pair, they're open away from each other. And then the third one, they're closed. And the fourth one, they're open. And this is really important. If we don't do this part correctly, it's not going to do the magical bit at the end. But just make sure that as you go down the pleat, they're going opposite each other. And then when you start on the next pleat, they're mirroring each other, and you'll be fine. So I'll do it one more time with this third row. And then if people want me to repeat it, I can. So I'm going to stand up the whole pleat. And then because in the first one in the second row was coming towards me, the first one in the third row will go away from me. I'm going to fold it that direction. And then the next one, because it goes opposite this one, will come towards me, and then away and towards. So it should look like this. And if you want me to undo that and redo it, I can. The other way I think about this is you sort of have these wide rectangular shapes that it forms that are offset from each other by a half segment. It's sort of like brick, how you would lay bricks on a wall if they were offset from each other. If that makes sense. So does anybody want me to repeat that, or shall we move on to the magical final step?
I am not seeing anyone saying, hold on.
Okay, I am going to rotate the paper. So we just did the pleats that were going in one direction. There's still, even though we've got all this paper layered on top of each other and overlapping now, there's still pleats running horizontally. They're just running through these layers of paper. So we're going to You can see the edges of the first one here. So we're going to take that mountain fold and start lifting it. And this is where sort of flattening the paper with your palms and then pinching your thumbs and your fingers will help you to stand up that first pleat. And then once you've got it pinched together, you can actually open where we cut the slits. And this is where it reveals the back side of your paper. Now, if your papers are not, if it's not opening nicely, that means that you didn't do the back and forth quite right in the previous step. So if you're struggling to open up, once you stand it up, it should want to sort of start falling open. Can you see how this just wants to, you can see that it's, you know, wanting to open up. If yours isn't doing that, that means that you didn't do all your opposites correctly in the previous step, but you can just go back and fix it. So that's row number 1. And then we're going to, again, flatten the paper with your hands and just sort of start pinching forward until that mountain fold and the second pleat starts to form, and see how the paper just wants to unfold. That's what I love about this. Paul Jackson, you are brilliant. And then we have our second row. And we'll just do the same thing with the third one, just sort of flatten. And once you've got it standing straight up and you've got your valley folds nicely positioned, then these just open up. Et voila. We have magically combined imagery from the back onto the front. And it's not just that you have brought it forward, it has rotated different parts of the image in interesting ways. And that's something that's fun to maybe plan out and play with too, if you're doing some kind of structure with this that you're thinking a little more specifically about. And then I haven't shown you the back yet, but the back looks really interesting too. You get this cool woven effect on the back as well. So, you know, you can use this as the front too of a design. Okay, so if everybody's good with that, then what I would like to do, I'm going to show you one more quick trick, but we have to unfold one of these rows. And I might as well show you that because it's good to know how to do that anyway.
Before you do that, if someone was asking, they said if the edges kind of pinch, should I cut the slots a bit? Is that?
Oh yeah, that yes. If they're opening but they don't want to completely flatten, then yeah, just when you were cutting, you didn't cut all the way to the valley fold. That's why I suggest you cut just a little bit over the valley, just so that yeah. So if it's pinching, you just need to cut it a little bit more.
Right. And if it doesn't naturally try to open up?
That means the previous step, you didn't get all of those opposite. You didn't fold down your pleats opposite each other completely. So you'll have to go back to that step. And it might make, well, I'm going to unfold this so we can do the next piece. So maybe I can show, do you want me to show that step again? Where you lay down the different parts of the pleat and do them opposite?
Someone's saying yes. So.
Okay, so let me show you how you unfold this, because you might want to get it to this stage and then decide, let me just show you, where is you might get to this stage and decide, you know what, I don't really like the rectangles. I would like circles, or I would like some other kind of funky shape. Or I think I even have hexagons here somewhere. Where's my hexagon? You can even cut it into a hexagon shape. So you're going to need to unfold to do that. So let me, I had rotated this, so let me rotate back. This was the last step we did. So you're going to take, I'm going to start at the bottom again. Take your first row and just pinch that pleat back so it's standing up, and then you can pull the paper flat. You can pull it back towards you down here. And just do that for each of the 3. Make sure they're standing up. And if you've folded and unfolded it a few times, you can just tug at the paper and it'll unfold, but it's best to stand it up just so you don't risk tearing anything. Okay, so I'll go back to this layer. And then for this to undo this layer, you have to stand up all of your pleat segments and get them all as vertical as you can. And then you're going to pull your paper out, and then we'll stand up the 4 sections here and pull it out. And we'll stand up these 4. You just need them to go back to being all vertical, and then it will unfold. Okay, so let me repeat. Actually, before I repeat that step, because we need to do it anyway, this is the stage where if you're going to cut, you would do it now. So the circle and the hexagon and even a diamond shape are symmetrical. So to cut those, what you do is you take, let me start with this. I've folded back on my first mountain fold, and then I'm going to also fold over the first mountain fold that goes in the opposite direction. So I've got all 4 layers that are cut from the center. It's a little hard to see on this dark paper. Let me pick a different one that's lighter so you can see it better. So I'm going to fold my mountain fold, and then I'm going to fold the other. I'm going to fold the mountain fold back in the opposite direction. So I've got 4 layers of paper stacked up where we did the cuts, and you know you're in the right place because you've got access to all of these 4 edges. And then if you want to make a circle, although because we did rectangular paper, we're going to get an oval instead. You're going to cut from the edge of your cut, and you're going to cut. Whoops. You're going to cut an arc. I'm not drawing. You're going to cut an arc like that from this corner through all 4 layers. You're basically cutting from the valley fold that's going horizontally to the valley fold that's going vertically up at the top. And I'll just do the one, but you could do it for all of them. And so then you get this shape where it's like a star shape because you removed some of the material. Okay, so now I'm going to show you doing the back and forth with the cut pleats again. So stand up your first mountain fold, and I'm going to fold the first one that's on my left away from me, the first segment. So there's 4 flaps here that we have to lay down. And we want to lay them down opposite. So the first one's going to go away from me. The second one will go towards me. The third one will go away. And the fourth one will go towards me. I'm going to crease those. And then when I start in the second row, the second mountain fold, because this one was folded away from me, the first one in the next layer will fold towards me. So you're just going to keep doing the opposite fold. And so toward, away, toward, away. But it's also going to form these pairs where these 2 folds are touching. These 2 fold away from each other. These 2 are touching, and these 2 fold away from each other. And then the last row, because the first pleat, the first section of the pleat in the second row is folding towards me, this first one will fold away, and then towards, and away, and towards. And you get this sort of tiling pattern where if you go along your row, the flaps should be opposite each other. And then when you go to the second row, they should mirror the first row. So these 2 will come together, those 2 will go apart, together, apart, and then apart, together, if that makes sense. Okay, and then I'm going to rotate. And then when I pinch the mountain fold up for this one and I open it, you'll see that this first one that I cut gives me an oval shape. So you pinch and let it fall open. And pinch, let it fall open. Okay. So play with cutting. You can also fold if you wanted to get a diamond shape. You don't even have to cut. You can just fold. Let me use this one over here because it's lighter and it's easier to see. So I'm just going to fold in a triangle in each corner because this outer two edges are free. So you can, and this is what I do. I learned how to make this, and then I didn't do anything with it. I made an origami fold, stuck it in the book. This is what I do. I make samples of things, stick them in the book. And then I was looking for some inspiration last year for something and came back to the book and started playing with this technique and thinking, well, what else can I do with this? You know, it's nice, but, and then if you take your triangles and you fold them behind, then it'll reveal this shape. I started playing with, you know, what can I do with these rectangular flaps? What other shapes can I make? And I just played. And here are some of the things that I came up with. So I showed you the different shapes that you can do. So the circle is easy because you cut all 4 layers. This one, the top half is a circle, you just do 2 of the segments and you do circle, but the bottom half you actually cut. Instead of doing an arc that curves this way, you do an arc that curves this way between those corners. And then the hexagon is sort of similar to what I just folded. If you have a rectangle and you just fold in the 4 corners, you get a hexagon shape. So you can play with shapes. And then when I was going to be teaching San Diego Book Arts, I started thinking, well, what can I do in the 3rd dimension? And so I came up with, and this works best with the rectangular shape. You can curl up the edges and make sort of these canoe shapes, which I really like. And then I tucked in a little bit of folded paper in the center there. And I liked this idea, but I thought, well, if I was making this into a book, I'd kind of like the page opposite to nest in these shapes. And so I came up with this. So this is still that sort of canoe shape, although it's more square because this paper was more square. And then I cut these petals. So for these, I actually cut into part of the paper that we hadn't cut already and made this sort of twirly pattern. And then these little flower bits fit inside of the canoe sort of shape. So it doesn't completely close, but it sort of nests. And I've been playing with the idea of other ways to nest the shapes together. It gets a little complicated, but it's fun. And I showed you the lantern already. So this, like I said, I had done a pleated lantern that Helen Hebert taught. And I just thought it'd be fun to have this reveal of a different color in the center. So you can just have it be a single pleat. Well, it's pleated in 2 directions, but you can just do a single one, you know, located where you want it to be. Let me show you another magazine page where I did something like that. So I just wanted pleats to go in these 4 positions. And so I just folded the pleats vertically to go through the center of them and then just horizontally exactly where I wanted them to go. So you can do pleats all over the page. They don't have to all nest in the center like they do with something like this. You can have space between them. You can even have pleats that are not perpendicular and parallel to the edges of your paper. As long as the 2 pleats form a 90-degree angle where they cross, then this will work. And in fact, I have, this is also getting a little more advanced in terms of origami folding, but you can do, I can't find it. You can do a grid that is a triangular base, and you can fold hexagons into that triangular base. So instead of folding pleats that are at 90-degree angles, you can fold pleats that I believe are at 120-degree angles, and then you can make hexagons out of that. I don't see my sample. Anyway, there's all kinds of ways to play with this. So I encourage you to do that. And then something else I did on a very long sheet of paper was I made a grid. This was 2 wide and 3 tall. So it was folded in thirds in one direction and quarters in the other direction. And then I realized that that gave me a big enough grid to do like digital numbers by just folding away parts of the cut paper. So lots of possibilities, lots of things to play with, lots of shapes to try, lots of combinations of imagery from the back to the front. It's endless. And it's what like I said, it's what I like to do when I'm doing book arts. I like to learn a technique and then push it and pull it and stretch it and try different things and see what I can do with it. And this one also can fold up into a book shape. I left space in between the pleats so that it can fold. Oh, and one other thing, if you want to use this for an altered book, which is kind of how I think of it, but the pages are just the same basically on front and back, you can paint the page on the back side. I just used watercolor to paint some of the back side, and then when it comes through, it's a different color. Or you can apply paper, laminate some paper on the back, and then when you do all of your pleating and cutting, you get the paper that you applied coming through. I even used very thin fabric on this one. So lots and lots of possibilities. And if you want to, a lot of this is just showing you single sheets, but you can do something like this where you have a center fold in your paper, and you just don't disturb that center fold. You leave that for binding, and you do your pleats on either side. You treat each half of the paper as its own piece of paper. And so you can bind pages like that as well. Anyway, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer questions, and thank you all for attending.
Great. Everyone seems very excited. It was a lot of fun. So you showed the centerfold on how to bind it, so that's good. We got that covered. Sarah wanted to see the one with the cut ovals just one more time, if you could pull that out.
Sure.
I'll ask you a few more questions. Laurel's asking if you have written directions. Is that something you do with your other workshops, or do you just work through the process?
I'm trying to think if I did a blog post about this. I don't think so, but I could. Because it's a Paul Jackson design and it's already in his book, I don't want to step on toes in terms of, I guess I could offer directions for how to do the shapes. And like I said, I have the video on YouTube for, if you look up my name on YouTube, just search for Gina Pisello on YouTube, you can find, I only have 3 videos. So you can find the red lantern video. And this one, you actually have to do a lot of measuring. It's not quite as easy as what I showed today, because I wanted to center these pleats in the middle of the lantern. You have to actually measure all of the folds, but I go through how to do that. And I think there's I know I made a page like this for, the crease pattern for the lantern is also available, I think, on my blog. But I don't have directions written up just because it's pretty straightforward. You just fold each direction in quarters and then do the cutting on those mountain folds. And like I said, you can look in Paul Jackson's book at how to fold down the pleats.
Great. Patricia wants to know if it matters whether you fold the shutters horizontal or vertically.
It does not. It does give you a slightly different look. So if you look at my this book that I altered, if you look at the top edge, do you see how on some of them it's wide here, and on some of them it's narrow right in the middle? That's because I started the pleat. I started that folding down of the pleat in different directions, and it does slightly change how the back is revealed in the front, but you should play with that and see how, what changes it makes, but it'll work either way.
Okay, great. And again, Ellen wants to know if you're doing most of the work from the back. So that was the back of the sheet that we saw most of the time during your demo. Is that correct?
Well, to me, that's the front, because you end up with both sides showing at the end, but you start out on what I consider the back or the colorful side, doing your valley folds, valley fold vertically and valley fold horizontally. Then we turn it over and we're working on the planar side for the rest of the time.
Great.
So I think of it more as like the decorative side and the plain side. But you can have the plain side pop through the decorative side. I don't have any examples of that, but that is something you can do. I was just teaching it this way because I wanted the plainer side to be face up most of the time, just so that it made it easier for people to see the fold. But when you're doing it yourself, play with using both sides and see what you prefer. You might like a colorful ground with white or a single color being these shapes in the center. You might prefer that.
Right. I just want to remind everyone that the video will be up by tomorrow on the conference website. So if you want to see it again and watch those steps, you can do so. Would you mind taking a minute to show both the front and the back of some of these sheets, just so we can see how they look?
Sure. So this is the one that I showed at the beginning. This is what I consider the front, with all the flaps that have been opened up. And then this is what the back looks like. So it was an image of a woman in an orange dress. And then this one is from a local magazine. So that's the front, and then this is the back. And let me show you one where it's just thirds. So you can see what that looks like. Well, this has some paper woven through it, but this is one where I divided the paper into thirds. So then you only get these 4 blocks in the center. And that's the back. Just ignore the red woven paper. And then this is the one where I strategically did the pleats over these 4 sections. And this is what the back looks like. So this was a magazine ad where there were these highlighted 4 areas on both the front and the back of each page of artwork. And I just thought it'd be fun to pop through just where the artwork was. And then if you want to see one of these longer ones, so this is the one where I actually did 3 separate sections that I folded into pleats. Oh, and that's another thing. When you can treat these as separate in terms of the vertical area, you can make that wider or narrower, but the pleats that go all the way across the paper have to be consistent all the way across, if that makes sense.
Great. Someone was curious about that paper.
This paper?
Yeah.
It's some kind of, I don't know. I bought it at Paper Source. I think it's a handmade, probably a Lopta or something. Okay. And I eco-dyed it. So it's sort of changed from what it originally looked like. That's where these dark stains are coming from. I did some eco printing on it.
Great. And then you talked about gluing adhering paper or fabric on the back before doing your pleating. Did you? Yes. Is there a particular way you did that?
Well, you want it to be thin paper or fabric, just because you don't want to add bulk. But I think I either used a glue stick so that I minimized the amount of glue, or just very thin PVA. And the thing is, you might want to fold it first and see what part is going to pop through before you apply it, or at least fold a sample one first, because here, let me unfold this and I'll show you. It's not necessarily where you think it's going to be that pops through. So this will also give you an idea of how. So this one also was, so this was one that I divided, well, maybe I just did thirds in both directions. Yeah, I think I did. So let me show you this size of fabric that I put on back. So this was the original size of the paper, and this was the piece of fabric that I glued on. But I think I folded all of my pleats first, and then I applied the paper, so that I knew how far out I had to cover with the fabric. Because if you just kind of randomly stick it in the middle, you might not get it wide enough or high enough to pop through. And then what's cool is on the back, you get this center bit woven in on you. And the nice thing is the paper remembers how it was. And I'm actually refolding this the opposite to how it was before, and it's fine with that. So anyway, just another possible way of manipulating and altering.
Well, I think we've got most of them. There may be a few more. If you don't mind, maybe checking in on the conference website to see if there's any specific questions that come up, that'd be great.
Yes, I can do that. I'm going to be here. For me, it's morning, so I'll be here for another couple of hours, and then I've got someplace I need to be. But yeah, I will check in and see if anybody has any other specific questions. And I don't know if I said this at the beginning, but you really want to at least start with thinner paper, and then like this is the thickest paper I've tried folding, this catalog paper, and it's cardstock weight. And the problem with this is it starts cracking. I don't know if you could, if you can see on the folds how you start losing some of the ink because it cracks because it's so thick. And it's also just harder to fold, but it does work. It's just, you might want to start with, you might want to test a paper, do some pleats with it and see if it folds the way you like. And like this old paper can be a little brittle. Oh, I forgot to mention this. One of the things that when you're altering, if you're using vintage or old books to alter, the paper quality is very variable. And I like to make sure the paper folds without cracking or breaking before I use it, or otherwise I don't use that paper. And there's a little bit of cracking going on the edge here, but some paper is beautiful and folds wonderfully, and some paper just wants to fall apart. So it wouldn't make good paper for this.
Okay, great, thanks.
But washi paper would do very well. All those yummy papers that were being shown this morning.
Thank you, Gina. This is Karen again. We're all done with questions for now?
I think so.
Okay. Well, I'm going to share my screen again. I just want to say I love seeing the excitement that everyone was expressing in the chat when you got to the step where the magic happens. It's so fun to see. I didn't get to follow along, but I'm definitely going to watch the recording myself.
It really is magical. It just kind of appears out of nowhere. And
yeah. Well, thanks again, and thanks to everyone in the audience and to our sponsors. Once again, I'm going to share my screen here. I have a few closing slides to share. We hope to see you all in one of our classes at Book Paper Thread in the future. You can follow us on social media. We have Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, or you can sign up for our mailing list on our website to get the latest news via email. Here are a few classes that are coming up. We have Kakashibu and Washi with Linda Marshall beginning February 27th. Books for Photographers and Printmakers with Andrew Hewitt beginning on March 3rd. And I'll be teaching the storage book on starting on March 27th. I also want to remind you all that you can find the recordings and any handouts, as well as the transcript from the chat section on our webinars tab. So if you click on one of the webinars where there once was the link to join the webinar, you'll see a video that you can play there. And if you have more comments and questions regarding this presentation, you can do so in the continued conversation section of our conference site. Our next presentation will be Suzanne Moore this evening at 7:30 Eastern Time. Beyond Pigment and Paste, Creating New Dimensions on Paper. And lastly, I just want to finish up by mentioning that you'll be receiving an evaluation after the conference, and we'd love to hear your feedback on the format and the content of the event. Thank you all, and have a great afternoon.